Welcome to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, the podcast where we dive deep into the journey from vision to reality. I'm Kelly Jackson, your guide on this path of self-discovery, transformation, and intentional living. Here, we explore everything from mindset shifts and personal growth to spiritual alignment and entrepreneurship, sharing insights, stories, and actionable wisdom to help you live a life in harmony with your dreams. Every episode will dig into what it means to not only dream big, but to actually consciously create the life you envision. Let's turn your dreams into real life. Welcome back. All right, guys. Over the years, I have worn a lot of hats, as you know. I was like 10 years in the service industry, 6+ years running a landscape contracting company, and more than 5 years as a full-time professional artist. I had an event planning company. I had a screen printing business. The list goes on. There were lots of things. And now I'm stepping into this holistic coaching and business alignment work that feels like the culmination of it all. And each season taught me something, and each chapter gave me lessons that, I didn't always see at the time, but they ultimately shaped me into who I am today. So I thought it would be fun and hopefully powerful for you to share some of those stories and the wisdom that I've carried forward from each experience. And because I know that so many of you are also navigating transitions and reinventing yourselves and wondering if all the twists and turns in your story really even mean something, And a spoiler alert, they do really matter. So today we're going to start with my years as a landscape contractor. That's what I feel inspired to talk about right now. Yep, you heard that right. I used to own a landscaping company, and while it was sweaty and dirty and exhausting work, it was also a masterclass in vision, design, leadership, and alignment. And those lessons still influence me today and in ways that you might not even expect. So I want to flow right into this. And I have nothing written down for this. If you listened 2 weeks ago, I followed this format as well. I am feeling inspired to do things a little differently this month, and we're just going to play it by ear and see what happens. And so I'm not necessarily setting out to teach you anything today, although the lessons will come up. I'm sharing lessons I've already learned. What I've been doing lately prior to October is wanting this podcast to be a place where you can come and learn and grow and do the little personal development work and everything like that. And I believe we have positively achieved that over here at Dreamed It Then Real Lifed It. It is all of those things. And now there's another layer, another element to this podcast that it's time to start weaving. And that is this element of, I want to share a little bit more about me. So this month, this series that I was mentioning, and the episode that I did, the first episode in October, that was about my mental health journey. This is going to be a little continuation of that, in the sense that I have nothing. I don't even have like a piece of paper in front of me. This is me. I'm going to recount some of my stories, maybe like some of my first big landscaping projects I remember, or what they taught me about vision, execution, some of the challenges that came, maybe some metaphors. Who even knows what all will come up? But I know this. For as long as I was a landscaper, I had the business. I was doing this professionally. I had a crew that worked for me. This was the first company I ever had where I hired other people, where we actually had a crew. And I did a lot of things right with that landscape company, and I did a whole lot of things wrong. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned a lot of lessons, and it was one of the most beautiful and transformative times of my life. And I'm excited to share more about this with y'all. But all that to say this, so this podcast has been educational, and there's been moments, right, of me. Every episode, I share some personal stories in the episode, but I always kind of come in with an outline and an idea of what big points I want to hit on. And then I'll just riff on that. I'll freestyle riff on it, but I come in with some sort of an outline, some sort of an idea of the flow of the episode, how I want it to go. And I'm not doing that this month. I'm doing something different. I'm coming in here with nothing, and I'm having a conversation, and I'm hoping October will be a month where you can get to know me a little better. And so you'll still learn something. You'll learn something about me, but you'll still learn something. You'll pick up on, because I'm going to be sharing the lessons I've learned. But I'm not coming in here with like a teacher, like with a lesson plan, right? So there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. And I'm grateful that I've done that. I really love these episodes, and you all have had such a positive response as well, and I know that they've been helpful and beneficial to you, and I'm grateful whenever you give me that feedback and let me know. And also, I think this is important too. We're reaching a point in our journey together. If you've been following along, maybe you're one of those listeners who's been tuning in every week ever since the podcast launched, and I see you, and I'm grateful for you, and thank you. And maybe this is your first time tuning in. I don't know. Maybe you just tune in when you got a little space in your schedule for it, or you're taking a little road trip or whatever. So I want to just do things differently this month and see what happens, okay? And you'll get to know me a little better. So let's start with how it even all happened. I went to LSU for graphic design. It's a 5-year program there. You take all kinds of design classes, art classes. I took a couple landscape architecture classes while I was at LSU, and my mom was a Louisiana master gardener at the time. She was really into all that. And I grew up in a family where outdoor living was always a thing. Like, my dad builds all kinds of stuff. He's a handyman. I mean, not by trade. That's not his well, I guess in some ways it is, but he just builds everything from cars to homes to anything in between. And so all growing up, our backyard was like decked out. I mean, it had decks and walkways and landscaping and, structures and hot tubs and little ponds, and it was just like there was all kinds of things, right? And then Mom had gotten into the Louisiana master gardening and was really into that. And so I was a graphic designer at the time. I had graduated, and I was doing freelance design work, and I had a screen printing company at the time. Like I mentioned, I was doing screen printing, like silkscreen machine, and I had clients and orders and, printing shirts and all of that kind of stuff. And I also had my own line, but I had clients I worked for too, organizations and whatnot. And I was married at the time, and my husband at the time was an account manager at some company, and he wanted to quit that job and decided he wanted his own business, and he wanted to have a lawn company, like cut grass. And he started that, and then some of the clients started asking about flower beds and do you do landscaping? And he wasn't into that. That wasn't his thing, but my wheels started turning, and I was like, I'm into that. I love that kind of stuff. And there was a need for it because there was already the client base, right? Like he already had the clients. They were his clients already, and they were asking for additional services. He didn't have a way to provide those services, so he would be out like, no, you got to call somebody else. And it was like, well, why not just have me be the one that they call? So I went, and we were newlyweds at the time, and so the idea of working together sounded fun. And I went and got all of the necessary licenses, everything that you needed to get. So I went, did all the studying because you've got to be licensed to be a landscape contractor. Now, keep in mind, I was not a landscape architect. You have to have a degree to be a landscape architect. I had taken a couple landscape architecture courses at LSU as part of my prerequisites and, or part of my curriculum for the design program there at LSU in the College of Design. But I did not have my degree in landscape architecture. I had my degree in graphic design, which is a bachelor in fine arts with a concentration in graphic design. So but I was a landscape contractor, and you do have to have a license for that. And that means that you are licensed to be doing landscape jobs. And then, of course, on top of that, there's all kinds of other licenses that go along with that. And for the lawn company that we had, I got all the licenses that were needed. And that's something that you have to, I would go to New Orleans, and, you go to training, you go to a day or a weekend thing, you learn, and then you have to take tests, and then these are things that you do annually. This is all part of it. Lots of different types of trades and industries have things like this, but it was just part of the responsibility of having that business. Only one person, my husband at the time, he didn't have to also have one. It was just as long as somebody with the company did. And it was, we did separate things. Again, he had a lawn company, and what I was doing was landscaping. We had different crews. He had guys that worked for him, and I had girls and guys who worked for me. And my sister was my first employee, or really, I don't even know if you would call it an employee. I guess you would, but contractor. She worked for us. And that was nice. Obviously, she had grown up in the same house I grew up in. So, well, I guess that's not always the case. But my sister did grow up in the same house I grew up in. So she had the same dad with the same skill set, and the same mom with the same interest and passion in the landscape or the master gardener. So she and I both have a passion for landscaping and gardening and being outside. And it worked out well, and it was fun that I got to work with my sister. She's 2.5 years younger than I am. And she had back then just had a baby. He was a new baby, not very old, under a year. And so when we first started, and so it was great because I just, it was such a fun time in my life when my nephew was born. I was so excited. And the funny thing is, so at this time we had started this company, I was bartending. And that's one thing I mentioned. I was in the service industry for over 10 years. And definitely that needs its whole own episode. But so I bartended through college, well, and waited tables, did all that. But I worked all through college and then beyond college. And so while I was, of course, I didn't have children yet, but so while I still had this graphic design freelancing and I had the screen printing company I was doing, and then I had started a landscape company, well, I was still bartending. And so aside from the clients that were coming from my husband at the time's lawn company, I also had clients that were coming from all my regulars at my bartending job, where I had worked for like this one place for like 7 years or 6 years or something at the time. So it was this great time in my life. Okay, so I'm getting off all over the place. So my sister worked for me. We worked together at that place where I bartended as well. So it was good. We were close. We got to work together. We had fun together. I got to see my nephew often. He was a baby. He was like the light of my life. I was so happy when he was born. And yeah, it was fun. So what ends up happening is we had a little crew starting out. There was probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would say, myself included, there were probably 5 of us. And I would work too. I was like, I'm young, and again, it was what I wanted to do. It was fun. I had fun. I wasn't just, the way I went into it was not, I did not know what I know now. So the way I was building this business was very grassroots. It was very white knuckle. It was very the wrong way in so many ways. It was crazy, but it was fun. We were young. It was thriving. Stuff was happening, and we were having a good time. And my dearest friend at the time, also, she came to work with us. And so it was someone that was important in my sister's life at the time, also came and worked with us. And so we just had it was just like basically family. It was everybody that was, and then maybe 1 or 2 extra people that were hired that weren't. But for the most part, it was like our close family, and we were working together every day, and we were young, and we were just starting our lives, and really starting them, like just out of college, and just beginning to build these careers, and didn't know what it would become or what would happen or where it would lead yet. And I have such great work ethic that I was just out there and I was doing it and I loved it. And it was staying in shape. I wasn't even having to think about it, right? Because I was just moving every day. And when I tell y'all I was out there, yes, I had a pickup truck at the time. I drove a Ford F-150, the extended, the 4 doors. And I had trailers. I had a Bobcat. I pulled the trailers in the Bobcat and all this stuff. And speaking of that, I remember there's one bridge. It's called the Sunshine Bridge. And we had this big job at this place over there. Oh my gosh, that job. Oh, I remember that job. And this bridge that you had to go to get on over there, it was like a really steep bridge. And I just remember the first time I went over that bridge, and I was pulling the Bobcat on the trailer, and I felt like I was going up a mountain, and it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I was like, oh my gosh, if that Bobcat were to slide off, like every scary, negative, panic thought that you could have, I was having. This is all flashing back to me. Oh my gosh, I just realized my nervous system is still holding this in my body. That was terrifying. It was terrifying. It was, and I remember there were, you're on the bridge, you can't turn around, you're going up, there's cars coming behind you, and what are you going to do? You just have to trust and keep going and trust that all those anchors and ties and straps and brakes that you got going are going to come through for you, because, whew, that was not fun. Just when I said that, I think about 5 terrifying landscaping stories involving the trailer just flashed into my mind. So, yeah, it was fun. It was a fun time. We were busy. We had so much work. It was word of mouth. We weren't, I was, of course, a graphic designer, so I, designed the little logo. We got the trailer. We did all the things. It was fun. I had my screen printing business, so I, of course, was like, we need uniforms, and so I printed shirts for everybody, and we all just had fun. We were being silly. We would come up with these little sayings that we would put on the tank tops or the tees or whatever the clothes that we bought were. And, I remember one said, we're kind of like maids for your flower beds. That was one for when people were going to do flower bed maintenance. I remember we had the Real Men Love Flowers. And we would just put funny, cute little sayings on the shirts. And because, again, I had a t-shirt business at the time. So aside from doing orders for like schools and restaurants and bars and sports groups, like teams, I had my own line of novelty tees. So I was already manufacturing stuff that was in different stores and retail locations at the time. And so that was already something I was doing. So it was just natural that we all had all these shirts. And since I had this all on site, like my entire garage had been transformed into a screen printing shop. So I had like the 220 outlet, the conveyor dryer, the big 6-color press. Again, that's a whole nother episode, but it was just set up. So this was something that we could just basically, I had the dark room where I could burn screens. We could just come home and have ideas and turn them into reality, which was fun. And it was all my friends and my family and my sister, right? And we had a good time. And we did really big jobs. When I say really big jobs, like for the fact that I think my being not, I didn't even know what I didn't know. I was like, yeah, we can do it. And I'll figure out how to do it later, right? I'll learn what I need to learn and do what I need to do. And I just didn't get scared by hard work or big jobs. It was fun. And I would be out there digging holes for 30-gallon trees by hand with my little shovel. Like, guys, I'm telling you, I didn't care. It was fun and it was a good time. Now, I want to tell you some of the lessons that I learned along the way. For one, if you're traveling with anything in an open trailer or the back of a truck, make sure it's secured. That's just safety for you and everyone on the road. And another lesson is you have to cut things back so that they can grow. You have to prune to promote new growth. And so this is, nature is a teacher, and you can learn so much about life from watching, witnessing, observing nature, and learning not only from the seasons, the way that how to let go. I had a whole episode on that recently. But also, when you are landscaping and you have to trim things back to help them grow, energy, you have to trim off the dead, because what will happen is the plant will try to keep sending energy to heal that thing that is dying, that needs to be let go, that's diseased, that whatever. And so when you prune it back, then now the plant can direct its energy towards new growth in a new direction, not trying to save what's dead or dying or diseased. And when it can allocate its resources and nutrients to healthy parts and promote that new growth and development, well, then that's ideal. And pruning, okay, so it's going to stimulate the plant to produce new shoots and new leaves and flowers, which is going to lead to a fuller and more vigorous plant. Now, of course, with all this, I'm going to give you the metaphors, but you just got to wait for it, okay? When you're pruning, you have to make clean cuts, and you have to do it above the nodes. Like, to do it properly, you don't just go in there hacking away. I mean, if you want to do it properly, and I didn't do this back when I had the landscape company. Now I'm more mindful. Actually, you know what? We're just about how I talk to the plants now, and I treat them with more care. We'll get into that later. But for now, let's just talk about when you're cutting the plant. So there are certain places that you would want to cut, and a certain angle that you would want to cut that would minimize damage and promote healthy healing. And the angle that you cut can determine the direction that so you can actually mold and shape a plant by the direction, the angle that you make the cut. That will help determine the angle that the new growth will come in. You only want to remove what is necessary, like prune only what's dead or diseased or damaged, so that you can avoid stressing the plant. And then on top of that, you got to prune at the right time. Like, you want to prune during a plant's dormant season, or when they're not under stress, so that you can minimize the shock. Okay. I think about us, and I think about people. We have to prune back the dead, dying, diseased in our life too. Maybe it's a habit, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a relationship, maybe who knows what it is. But those things are slowly deteriorating, or maybe rapidly deteriorating our health, or contributing to the deterioration of our health. And so when we can identify those parts of ourselves or our life that are not healthy and thriving, maybe that look a little sparse, maybe that aren't as full, what we can do by pruning back, we promote new growth. So you got to look at the areas of your life where can I cut back to make room for something new to grow. And also, we have to be mindful about how we go in and do this. So just like with the plant, how we make the cut, right? If you can just go in and hack it all away and it'll do what it wants to do. But if you want to be a little more intentional, for instance, if there is a bald spot in this shrub and you want to kind of fill it out, you can go in and the little branches around the bald spot, if you kind of trim those little branches a little bit, you prune them a little bit, the plant will now say, uh-oh, we've just been cut there. We need to send our resources and energy there to grow, because it's been cut. And there are certain ways that you can do that so that you can promote new growth in that area where it was missing, it was sparse, it was bald, right? Okay, so if you know you can do this, then you think about your life. There are areas in your life where you do not feel whole and complete because ideally you want to feel whole and complete in every area of your life. But if there are some areas in your life where you don't feel whole and complete, then look at your life like that. Where are other areas? Where can I trim back here? Where can I prune here? Where can I evaluate my life and make some adjustments to create the space, and so energetically, so that I can allocate my resources differently to nurture this place in my life where it's not whole, it doesn't feel whole and complete, full, right? Or I feel a little empty. When by pruning your plants thoughtfully, you can help your plants thrive and enjoy like healthy, vigorous growth. And by pruning your lifestyle thoughtfully, you can help yourself thrive and enjoy healthy and vigorous growth. And when we're talking about plants, another thing that came to mind was the root system. And it's interesting, I have dug up countless plants. I have removed countless plants out of containers, and I've planted countless plants. And so I want to talk about, I have handled and felt and touched and connected with countless roots in my life. And all roots are not the same. All roots are not created equally. And I want to share a little bit about roots and what this inspires inside of me. I don't even yet know exactly what, but I'm going to talk about it. So, roots, when you take something out of a container, a planter, like a plant out of the plastic container, they sell it in at the nursery. What happens is it starts as a seedling, right? Or some sort of seed, or I guess depends on what it is, but they'll put it in there. And then as that grows, they'll move it up to a larger pot. And then as it grows, they'll move it up to a larger pot, right? Until they keep growing and they keep moving the pots up. Well, occasionally, or often, I guess, you'll get a plant that has been in this one container for a long time. Like, say you'll go get a 5-gallon plant that has been in that 5-gallon container for a very long time. And when you go to take it out, that root system is so hard and compacted. And it is like the roots are just rock solid almost. And they wrap all the way around. So even when you take the plastic container off, it looks like the plant, the roots look like they're making the container, right? Because they're wrapping around in circles. They were going the only place they knew to go, which was around the form of the plastic pot. And the roots, they're just hard. The roots keep growing, but they don't have anywhere to go. And so the plant eventually can only get so big inside of a container where the roots are limited. So that plant will max out. Sometimes you will even see the plant has a will to grow, and the plastic container is not strong enough to resist the will of the plant. And the root ball will grow so much that it will bust through a little bit, kind of pop the seam, so to speak, of that plastic container. And so when you go to plant the plant in the ground, you always want the hole that you dig to be bigger than the root ball, right? And you don't just take this compacted root ball, you don't just take it out the plastic container and then put it in the hole in the ground. There's this step in between, and it's called massaging the roots. And this is a gentle massage. Sometimes you got to be a little rough when they're rock hard like that. You do have to be a little tougher on it. But the idea is that you're not yanking at the roots. You're not trying to break the roots, but you're trying to massage the roots out of that form that they took on, the shape of the thing that compacted. All the roots are all compacted together. And you want to massage them, loosen up the soil some, and encourage them to start growing out. You want to let them know they have a choice. You want to let them know they have an option. You want to let them know they don't have to stay all tight and bound up like that. Now they're free. And now they can grow and expand. And as we know, once the roots are able to grow and expand deeper, wider, the plant is now able to grow and expand as well. And so, when I said all roots are not created equally, there are some plants that have a very shallow root ball, like some palms come to mind. And that's why, I live in southern Louisiana where we have hurricanes, and that's why a storm can come and that palm can blow right over, right? Because the root ball is shallow and wide spreading. It grows horizontally rather than deeply. And this is unlike other trees, which, as you know, have more of a deep tap root. Palms don't. And then I think of something called Nandina. I was working with this just the other day. Nandina, on the other hand, has an extensive, strong, and deep network of thick roots that are really difficult to remove completely. And it's pervasive and it spreads aggressively, and it makes it kind of challenging to completely remove the whole system. Okay. And some people will say it's like a matted mess. And when you get in there and start seeing it's kind of wild. And there are some weeds. I think of this weed called nutsedge. And okay, again, in the hardy zone I'm at, or the climate I live in southern Louisiana, this is a really common, problemsome weed here. And it looks like grass. It looks like it'll pop up like 3 or 4 pieces of long, tall, bright green grass, okay? And it will grow everywhere. And this has like a complex network of underground structures that allows it to spread and thrive, okay? So, and this is not just the nutsedge. I'm giving you some examples. And again, stay with me here and follow why this matters. So you got rhizomes. These are like long, thin, underground stems that produce new shoots and roots, okay? And this enables nutsedge, or whatever plant has rhizomes, to spread horizontally, okay? That means you got one growing right in front of you, and if you were to be able to see under the ground to the root system, like through the dirt, you would find out that there is a root that like might be going off to the left 1 foot, and then at the end of that root, another one popping up right there. Okay, they're connected, even though from the top of the pine straw, it looks like there's a weed, and oh, way over there, there's a weed, but they're actually connected. Okay. They also have tubers and nutlets, which are these small bulb-like structures that form at the end of the rhizomes, okay, or the roots, and they store energy. My favorite word. And that allows the nutsedge or the plants to regrow and to produce new plants. And then when you think of something like an oak tree with huge roots that span out, again, we have these gorgeous 100, 200-year oak trees, 200-year-old oak trees all around southern Louisiana. And you look at the roots, and the branches come down and the roots go so far out, and there's just, and this isn't the only kind of root systems. I'm just naming a couple. And I'm going to get back to the root balls, but I wanted to talk about this. So when you think of people and we think of our roots and we view ourselves as part of nature and this whole human experience, it's different for all of us. Our root systems are different. Some spread wide and shallow, covering a lot of ground quickly but not going very deep. Others grow slow and steady, sinking deep tap roots that make them unshakable in storms. And you know what? Some of us grow fast, and some of us need more time underground before anyone even sees us bloom. And some of us branch wide, and some of us dig deep, and neither is better, guys. They're just different ways of being rooted. The problem is we often compare our growth to someone else's and not realizing that our roots were never meant to look the same, okay? That's the aha. Just like plants, your growth is perfectly designed for you. You have to trust your root system. You have to trust that what's happening underground is just as important as what the world is seeing above ground. So let's get back to the root balls. When you are going to plant a plant, you're going to dig the hole bigger than the root ball. And so we massage the roots, right? So you're encouraging them to grow out, grow down, grow out. And then you're going to want to give it space. If you were to only dig a hole the exact size of the root ball, and then you were to plant the plant in it, you need to fill it with soil, right? You need to backfill, and you wouldn't have any room to do that. What would happen is you would have these big air pockets, and it would hold air, and you wouldn't. And then when that would happen is when it rained or when you watered it, then those big places would hold water, and then that can lead to root rot and other underlying causes that you might not see from up top, but that would be happening below the surface. And so you make the hole a little bigger, you plant the plant, and then you fill it in with the soil and you pack it in there good and great and nicely, right? And you've created this nice new space for your plant to thrive. Guys, we can do this in our life too, okay? We can, just like also if they want to transplant, you want to dig a plant up and you want to plant it somewhere else. Well, again, ideally, you don't want to do this. For instance, in Louisiana, southern Louisiana, the summers, it's over 100 degrees. Ideally, you don't want to transplant if you have a tree that you want to move or a shrub to another part of the yard. You don't want to do this in the middle of the summer when it could, well, certainly not if it's blooming, right? You want to do this if it's dormant, but also when it's so hot, it could shock the system. It could stress the system, the plant. And we're like this too, guys. That's all I'm saying. Sometimes just be mindful of what else is going on in your life. And sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes we have to transplant ourselves, because we don't have a choice. It's just what has to happen. But sometimes we do have a choice. And so do it at a time, for instance, moving. If you have children and you want to move, like moving the week that they start school back up probably doesn't make the most sense, right? Because you got a lot going on. So that would be a lot of stress and shock to the system to be doing it at that time. That's not a dormant time in your life. Back to school is a really busy time in your life. So that's what I mean. You can pay attention to nature and how it works and apply this to our lives as well. I definitely think a lot of the lessons I learned with the landscape company have carried over to where I am now. There is something, okay, so I'll think of a job, and this is like a trusting the process. Again, I wasn't in the same headspace then where I am now, but now that I am where I am now, I can look back on these experiences with perspective, and it's great. So when I talk about trusting the process and God, the universe, your creator, whatever resonates with you, there is a bigger plan, right? And we don't always know that whole plan. You have to be open to it being even better than you imagine, but you have to trust the timing and trust the process and trust the beautiful unfolding of your life. So I think about this landscape job that I had done, was working on, and in my head, I knew the order in which everything had to be done. There were several layers to this job, right? There were several different things that have to happen. There's lots of coordination when you're doing jobs that require removing old landscaping, old structures, old things like that, and then preparing the site for new things, and then new construction, and then delivery of new materials, and that usually comes from multiple vendors, right? So there's lots of different contractors and deliveries that are being coordinated, and there are different phases of the job that are happening. So there are, again, like I said, there's the initial phase is a cleanup. It's destruction, right? It's removing, it's tearing down, it's removing the old. And then, well, before that even happens, the first thing you got to go see it, check it out, right? That's the first step of a job. And then have the vision. You have to find out what the client wants. What are their needs? What are their desires? What are their wants? Do they have a budget? That's something that you got to find out too, right? And then what are their desires? What are their needs? What are their expectations? And then my favorite part was always, I can't say it. It was all my favorite part, but I love the design process. That was one of the things that I shined at, that I really loved doing, and that what drew me into it. Ultimately, what was the thing that drew me into it was the landscape design. I loved being able to, and even still do, to transform spaces and to take spaces that were blank canvases where there was nothing, new construction, where there was nothing, where there was just, you're looking at blueprints and come up with plans from there, but also to be able to envision something in your mind. Maybe there was something existing that needed to be transformed or redone or whatever, and so, or added, and it was just so much fun. And so once you agree on the design, and then the first phase would start, and that was the destruction phase, if that was a thing. And so I'm thinking back to this one thing in particular, and I'm laughing now with this perspective I have, and I'm like, man, this is really what God was like with me, or has been like with me, or is like with us. And so I have this whole timeline. I have everything mapped out. I know my own schedule. I know the availability. I know when all of the contractors are lined up. There's this whole plan. And some things can't happen before other things happen. And if you don't know and understand what all's being done, like the process of maybe, say, irrigation and lighting wire and hardscaping and softscaping and landscaping and all these different elements that go into the finished final product, then you may not understand that some things need to happen before other things happen. And you know, but I understand that. And so I recall this client who was very anxious about wanting to always make sure, is this happening? Is this happening? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? And, you know, it's one of these things where I kind of now like laugh on the inside and say, oh my gosh, that's what we're like when we don't trust the process. That's what God's probably like every time we are double checking on something, pulling up that message, checking to see something. Whatever it is we do is like micromanaging, I guess, trying to control everything and not trusting the process, not trusting that the creator, in this case, I might have been the creator of the landscape design. In my case, maybe the creator of my life, God, whatever. But not trusting that the creator knows what they're doing and that they have a plan and that all is going to plan, even if it doesn't make sense to you right now, and that to sit back and relax, trust the process, trust the timing, trust the beautiful unfolding, and know that when it's all said and done, it's going to be even better than you imagined. But we tend to, and it was funny, it's funny, and I think back just every day, every time, every interaction, it was wanting to check and make sure on something. And is this happening? And is this happening? And guys, we do that in our lives. I want you to think about something you're manifesting, something that you desire, something that you've been moving towards, a goal, whatever the case may be. And how much are you stressing about this versus how much are you trusting and letting go that it's already yours and it's already happening and it's already on the way? And you know, that's what I have to say about that. So there is something to be said for me about being in the dirt, in the earth. About being dirty, about sweating and not caring, about just being one with the earth and learning. So when I had the landscape company, I wasn't like this as much, but I did. Oh, I'll tell you something funny about that. But I loved all the plants, but I didn't have the relationship with them that I have now, which is more of a reverence for all living things and more of an understanding that the plants have energy as well. And the plants are part of this whole thing. We're all connected, and that I can communicate with the plants through my words, through my vibration, through my energy. And now when I prune or cut things back, or even am pulling weeds, I'm talking to the plants, I'm communicating with them. I'm not just mindlessly pulling them out. It's more of a connected experience. And it's more of a fulfilling. The work was fulfilling back then, but for a different reason. I was at a different place in my life. And now when I work with plants, and there's more respect there for the living plant. But regardless, so the getting dirty, I am not afraid of getting dirty. I have eaten more dirt than I can even imagine. And it doesn't freak me out, guys. I've got a really strong immune system. I can't even tell you how many times we'd be out there working and then stop and eat your lunch or whatever it was you're eating. It was probably had dirt on it. That was real. And it was... I was just sharing this the other day with somebody when I had my daughters when I had that landscape company. And my first daughter, I'd had it a couple years, and I was breastfeeding her, and I would bring her to the jobs with me, and she would go to daycare during the day while I worked. But sometimes if she couldn't go, or if they were closed, or if I was working in the evenings or on the weekends, I would bring her with me. She was so good. She was so sweet. I loved having her with me anyway. And I would bring her in her exerciser or her little pack and play. And she would just be out there with me. I could nurse her. Otherwise, I'd have to go sit in my truck and pump, which I did do that as well. If I had some clients that we did regular work for, they would, of course, let me come inside and I would just nurse her in there in the living room. But so, yeah, she was my little landscape baby. She loved to be outside. She loved to just be there where I was, just, chilling. She'd get in that exerciser and just bounce and bounce and play as long as she was kind of there by me. She seemed to be good. And when I had my second, I had 2 under 2 at that point. They're just under 2 years apart. That's when I realized that I needed something with more flexibility. That's when I transitioned to full-time artist, because now doing the landscaping with a newborn and a toddler, it was like, the dynamics were a little different. But it was great. Like I said, my family's into it. My sister was doing it there with me, and she worked for me, with me, I think really the whole time I did it, because then once I got out of it, all my clients knew her. And so the clients that we were doing regular maintenance for, like where we would go and do their seasonal color changes and all their pots and in their flower beds and their pine straw, just like all of the different, that kind of stuff for, she already knew them. So when I got out of it, she started her own company and was able to just take over any of the clients that we had. They already knew her. It was great. And it was able for her to start building on her new company that she had for herself, which she's gone on to, much like myself, she's worn many hats and still does, had many companies. And that was just a fun thing we got to do together. I still enjoy landscaping and outdoor living. This is something that I'll occasionally still even do professionally, even though I do not have a crew. It's not like my full-time gig anymore, obviously, but it is something that I still have a handful of clients. I have a client who, real estate person, house flipper, that I did work for 20 years ago when I have the business, that'll occasionally call when they have something, because they still know me. And, these aren't huge jobs like some of the stuff we used to do. They're stuff that are manageable for myself. And occasionally I can call and have somebody join me if need be. But I do that because I still love to do it. And I love to do it at our own house, get out there and transform into outdoor living spaces. I love to do that in anyone's space. I think it's the transformation. I think that's one of the things that I loved the most. Also, I said the landscaping, the designing, the getting to coming up with the ideas, of course, is fun. But just even the transformation, even cleanup jobs. Like I remember, or in our early days, we would get some of the most, oh my gosh, we would just get some cleanup jobs that were, when I think back, I wish I had pictures of all of this, guys. The computer I had back then in college and beyond, all my pictures from college and this season of my life, I had that computer crashed and I didn't have the hard drive backed up. Lesson learned. But so I had just all of the designs, the before and afters of all these jobs. Truly, that is something I wish that I still had, but I don't. But yeah, it was so neat. I've always been, I guess, been into the transformation. It was so fun to be able to see the difference, like it was unfolding, and we were really good at what we did, and because we really loved what we did, and it was fun to revive people's spaces. And sometimes, like I said, it was new things. It was something had never been there before, and we were putting new things in. And sometimes it was taking things that needed TLC, that had been neglected, that had been overgrown, or whatever, outdated, and coming in there and just reviving it and freshening it up and breathing new life into it. And it is amazing, this, when you bring that new energy into a space, how it trickles over into every part of your life, and even sometimes your neighbors too, right? Like when you start working in your yard, it's like, getting it looking all good. Then the neighbors like start wanting their yard to look good, and it's like a ripple effect. And it really has the power to do that. Getting your space cleaned and your yard all fixed up and everything like that. I think that time in my life was so, what's the word I'm looking for? Important. I mean, for lack of a better word, it was such an important time in my life. I was working with my hands. I was doing manual labor, hard manual labor, really hard manual labor. I was a woman in a field that had a whole lot of men. And I was a young, cute woman. I will tell you a story. I was doing a job at this house, and a neighbor, and this would often happen, a neighbor had come by and said, "Hey, would you mind coming by my house? I live down the street, and coming and looking at my yard, my beds." And I said, "Sure." And I went and looked at this whole yard, and then made arrangements to come up with a design, proposal, and all this. And we had an appointment for me to go back to the house and to meet with this gentleman and his wife to present the landscape plans, which I did. And they ended up hiring me, and it wasn't until later. And now I would go on to work with this couple many times over the years, both at their home and businesses that they had owned. But what the wife ended up telling me later was, once we got to know each other and I had been working there, was that when her husband said that he had found someone to do their landscaping, and when I walked in the door, she said, my first thought was, there is no way I am letting you hire this girl to come work in my yard. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, do you really think that this is going to happen? And she said, nope, we're getting some more proposals, because she said, I was just thinking when I saw you walk in, there is no way. He must be crazy if he thinks I'm going to hire you to come work in my yard. Y'all, I'm like in my early 20s, just this cute little right out of college co-ed type thing. And here's the thing, and I'm telling you that because I heard one of my business gals that I love, Maria Went, she said this before, what she calls pretty privilege. Here's the thing. Sometimes it would feel challenging. And this was an example of something like that. And I was really, I'm still to this day, this stands out. And I'm grateful that she shared this story, because this is the reality of sometimes some of the things that I felt. And not only that I perceived, that I felt that I was actually really experiencing. And so she had said, nope, we're getting some more people. And she said, and we did. We had 2 more people come, and I'll be darned if you weren't the best of all of them. She said, there was no way. There was no comparison. You were the one. And So we hired you. And she's like, and it was the best thing I did. But there was that initial judgment, that initial perception on her part. And that is something that I do think that, well, it's worth mentioning, because this is something, again, I told you, I'm here to share my story and my perspective. And this is something, and there may be some of you who can relate to this. And there may be some of you who roll your eyes at this. And there may be some of you who go, oh my God, she's so full of herself. Well, you can think what you want. I'm not saying this was something that has helped me. What I'm saying is this is something that sometimes can feel like a challenge because of the way that people perceive you. They won't take you seriously. They think that because you look a certain way that you lack the skill, the knowledge, the capability to perform a job or to do something. And they don't even want to give you a chance. And they want to dismiss you because of the way you look. And what Maria talks about is that sometimes there is just this perception that there is a privilege to looking a certain way or being a certain way. And in some cases, perhaps there is, or people perceive that to be. But you also have to understand the reality that it goes other ways too. And that I don't consider myself to be some exceptionally gorgeous person, but I believe I'm beautiful, and that's taken work. And I feel like I'm pretty, and to be able to sit here and say that, that did not happen overnight, friends, I assure you. Okay? And this is not something that I could have said. Well, first off, I couldn't have even had a podcast or be talking in front of people, but this isn't something that I could have said or felt or truly believed many years ago. Certainly not 10 years ago, okay? But what I'm saying is this, is that this is all just part of the journey. And this is all stuff. And I'm recalling it now and just remembering what it felt like. It felt like both a relief and at the same time a little bit of like, okay, so sometimes I don't just make that up in my head. You know what I mean? And so sometimes maybe there was this feeling like I had to work harder to prove myself because people wouldn't take me seriously. But then also I can look back now and think of the ways that I did carry myself, present myself, and all those things that would have fed into that perception as well. So there's that. But, I think that one of the things that was, I will tell you another funny story about, I might have shared this before, but when we first started, one of the first jobs, probably one of the earlier jobs I did, was some dear friends who own a hair salon. And it's this gorgeous building that used to be a bank. It's just beautiful. And they bought it and made it into their hair salon. And so we're doing the landscaping there. And again, I was still bartending at the time. And one of my friends, the guys that owned the salon, had told me later that somebody had come in to get their hair cut. And again, I was bartending down the street and was like, how in the world did you get the place I was working at was called Sammy's. How in the world did you get the Sammy's bartender to work in your flower beds? They were like, it was fun. Guys, it was fun. I was just starting it. I was all over town. Serving you drinks on a Saturday night and digging in your flower beds on a Sunday morning. And I guess printing your shirts on a Monday afternoon. I was doing all the things. It was fun. It was a fun time in my life. And I guess nursing a newborn in your driveway. Oh my gosh. I really could probably go on and on and on and on, because there are so many lessons. There are so many stories. There's so much that has just come into my mind. I can't even process it all right now. I'll be interested to listen back to this and see what all I even shared, since I didn't really have a plan. But hopefully you just feel like you know me a little better. Maybe that was the whole goal of this, that you got a couple little, life lessons out of it, and more or less that you just felt like you were sitting here. Well, we can't say having a conversation with me, but listening to me ramble, I guess. I will see you next week for another totally fun and exciting episode. Bye, guys. Thanks for being here. Thank you for tuning in to Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It. I hope today's episode sparked something powerful within you. Remember, every step you take towards your vision counts, no matter how small. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a second to hit that subscribe button or leave a review. That would be amazing. Or share the podcast with someone who's ready to bring their dreams into reality too. And if you're looking to dive deeper, connect with me on social media at Dreamed It, Then Real Lifed It, or at BE_what you want. Or visit dreameditthenreallifedit.us for more resources on aligning your life, business, and dreams. Until next time, keep dreaming and keep manifesting your dreams into real life. Love you, friends.